believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson, and I'm so glad to be with you again on a Wednesday evening. Good to see all you beautiful people out there. Go ahead, put in the comments where you're watching from. I want to hear from you and see or hear from all of you beautiful people tonight. Thank you for attending. And if you're watching this as a replay or if you're new, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Tonight, we'll be talking to AJ Zito from Practical Performance. He's a great guy to talk to about competitive shooting, gunsmithing, all thing performance, things performance and gun. And he is full of knowledge and insight that we want to share with all of you. And the best part is he's a really cool guy to be around. He's a lot of fun. So I'm really looking forward to interviewing him tonight. He has been on the show in the past. So if you want to see the past video of AJ, you can search that up on Defenders Live on YouTube or Rumble. That also was a great interview. But before we get started, I do have a few announcements. First, we will have a live Q&A at the end of the broadcast. So be thinking of questions for AJ as we go along. If something pops in your head along the way, just drop it in the comments and we'll gather those at the end of the broadcast. Last thing too, if you want to be notified about upcoming shows, we do have an email list, and that is the best way for me to get in touch with you to let you know what's coming up next. As I've learned, as I've kept going on through the show here, my Facebook group, somehow, like when I post something, we have 520 people on that group, I think, and only like 20 people get notified in the entire group. So that's really not effective. So I thought maybe if I can get you guys to go over to defenders-live.com, put your email in that email list box at the very bottom, and that way you can keep up to date on what shows are coming up next. So that is something I would highly recommend you do if you're interested in staying in the loop. And Adam Winch, the founder of Defenders USA, is behind the scenes helping me tonight. And I heard a little birdie tell me today, Adam, that it's your birthday today. Is that true?
Absolutely not.
How old are you now?
I've told my
You gotta
boys
be like 29 at this point.
somewhere about there. I told my boys 4 and 6, and it's got them confused because they think it's 51, but it's not. It's 4 or 6.
It's not. It's
Yeah.
definitely not 51.
Yeah.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right. Well, I would sing happy birthday to you, but that's not going to happen on this show. But I'll ask AJ later and see if he'll do it for me. Okay.
I'll take it from AJ.
Okay. All right, cool. So last thing before we get to AJ, and this will be a pretty lighthearted broadcast, but there was a tidbit of the week last week that I wanted to share with you, and we didn't really have time for it last week, so I don't know if you remember this. I'm probably the only one that remembered that I promised you I'd put it in a video format and put it up on locals.com on the Defenders Live community, and I tried to put up a video, or not put it up, but I tried to create a video and it just like wasn't happening for some reason. It just wasn't very good. And so I just didn't feel like it was the right thing to do at the time. And I thought, well, if it makes sense to do it this week, I'll just wait and I'll do it this week live. So I think I will go ahead with that tidbit of the week that I postponed last week. It's a little bit heavy, guys. I'll just forewarn you in advance, not to bring the energy down too much. We'll get on to AJ here in a second, and I'm sure he'll help lighten the mood. But this is a really important tidbit. I've had it on my heart for quite some time. And so I just want to share with you some of the lessons that I've learned from walking through my own fire lately. So the tidbit of the week is called Walking Through the Fire. So the fire that I'm talking about that I've been walking through lately has been a really unexpected one and a really tough one for me. But it's not something that I feel comfortable sharing with the world. So don't think that that's going to happen. I'm not going to. Not yet anyway, maybe never. But what I do want to share with you are what the lessons I've been learning along the way, because that's the important part. And no matter what fire you're walking through, whether it's exactly like mine or not, really doesn't matter. These lessons can apply to any struggle that you're going through in your life. And things that I've learned that I hope you're not facing any of these fires today, but if you are, maybe this will help you walk through them. So the 5 things that I've learned from walking through the fire recently, and I'm not out of it, and I won't be for a while, I'm sure, and that's okay, is that number 1, the fire will, this is a hard one, the fire will reveal who you truly are, not who you think you are. And so we want to sit there and think that, I am fill in the blank person. I'm a strong person. I'm a tough person. But sometimes you get blindsided in life, and your true character reveals itself. And usually that is in the form of reacting to a situation rather than responding to a situation. And sometimes you don't really have time to think and respond. You tend to react. But just know that the good thing about this is that this revealing process will break you from a fog. It'll break you from maybe an illusion that you had about something in your life that you needed to break free from. And it'll also humble you in really big ways, in ways that are incredibly uncomfortable. And that allows you to ask yourself, do I like what this reveals about me? And should I work to change it? So sometimes we need those wake up calls in our life, right? So instead of looking at adversity or struggle or whatever the fire is in your life as a horrible thing, which it can feel like in the moment, know that it's revealing something in you that maybe you need to look at and change. Number 2, you're not going to want to hear this one either. Walking through the fire is necessary for growth. And that is something I've heard said before. It's really easy to say it and really hard to do it sometimes. So we know that you cannot change without going through some kind of a forging process, a heating up process. And that is what growth is. It is getting outside of your comfort zone. But sometimes when you're walking through a fire, it feels so debilitating because it is more than uncomfortable. I mean, it can just be like a gut punch, right? So I guarantee you won't like it. It will be painful. It'll probably bruise your ego. And the worst part is it'll probably open up old wounds that you don't want to face. And a good friend of mine told me one time that wounds, emotional wounds, psychological wounds are just like physical ones, that if you don't treat them and heal them properly when they happen, that they can fester and become infected, and they just hang out over time and just get worse and worse and worse. And you just kind of carry them along with you until you're forced to face them, clean that wound out, and let it heal properly. And that is the healthiest thing to do, but it's not always the easiest thing to do. But here's one other thing I want to tell you about that is if you ignore it, if you ignore the fire or the wake up call, it's not going to go away. It might go away temporarily, but it'll keep coming back in various forms in your life until you truly face it. And that is a fact. And that is true. And these are lots of things you might not want to hear, but they need to be said. And they're things that I think I wish I would have known. So I'm hoping this helps you. Number 3, if you're wise, you will look for the lesson. Now, when you're in the middle of the fire, you might not be looking for the lesson. You might be in survival mode, or you might be wallowing in why me mode, right? But if you take some time and get some separation, you won't be in a place of survival anymore. And perhaps you can get more into a place of openness and ask yourself, what am I to learn from this? But the key to asking the question is that you must sincerely want to know the answer. So if you ask, what am I here to learn? What's the lesson? Then you need to sincerely want to know the answer, because the answer is unfortunately probably, again, not what you want. The answer is probably to face the one thing that scares you the most, like the worst thing that scares you the most. And you might be really afraid to face that, but do it afraid. Do it anyway. Do it afraid. Because Here's number 4. The only way to come out the other side of the fire is to walk through it. You can't walk around it or avoid it, at least not forever. But if you're brave enough to walk through it with a humble heart and with sincere try, you'll be better for it. And again, if you don't, if you avoid it, it'll keep showing up over and over until you face it. Okay, last thing. The hardest part about walking through the fire is that no one can walk it for you. You have to do it yourself. Now, people can walk alongside you and you need support to do it, but you truly have to be the one to do it. And this is really hard too. So you must trust that although it's incredibly painful in the moment, again, if you stay humble and if you can learn to be self-aware as much as possible in going through it and honest, that you'll come out the other side more peaceful and more calm, more loving, and closer to the person that you were meant to be, or that you probably want to be, honestly, because it's no fun to live with open wounds or baggage that you carry around your entire life. It's no fun to do that. And it's actually really relieving once you face that fire and you walk through it. So don't avoid the fire. Don't shut down. Don't curse it. It's there for a reason. Face it and walk through it one baby step at a time, whether that's one day at a time, 1 hour at a time, or even 1 minute at a time. Be brave. If you don't know what to do or what you're supposed to do, reach out for help. Reach out to friends or a professional. Do it at your own pace if you have to. But most importantly, whatever that fire is, please know that you're not alone. That you are not the only one on the planet that's ever gone through anything like what you're going through. And that doesn't minimize it at all. But just know you're not on an island. It may feel like it, but you're not. And reaching out is really important. And remember that it's painful, but that it can be used for good. Okay. I hope that helps you or someone you love out there tonight. And I know that was a little bit not so lighthearted, but I had to tell you that, guys, when I learned something new, no matter how painful it is, and I learned it the hard way. I'm still learning the hard way. I'm so good at that. I have to share it with you. So there's my tidbit of the week, walking through the fire. All right, so let's get into, we've got lots of comments tonight, Adam. Or are you making most of them? Oh, no, you were quoting me through the whole thing? Oh, geez, that's embarrassing. Okay, well, thank you guys for watching tonight. I see Heather, Scott, Kathy, Chuck. I see all you guys. Nancy, Tori. Hey, Tori, you're back. Good to see you again. So I'm so glad that you guys are with us. So let's move on to why you really tuned in, which is AJ Zito. I mean, who wouldn't love AJ? AJ is the founder, gunsmith, and lead instructor for Practical Performance. He is a former member of the U.S. Army Certified Protection Specialist and Personal Security Detail Instructor, and formerly the primary and lead firearms instructor for multiple companies. AJ's focus after leaving the security and protection world has been on the concealed/covert carrying and deployment of firearms. He's a USPSA Master in Single Stack Division as well as a Multi-Division Master in IDPA. He also holds several expert and master ratings in multiple firearms disciplines, including pistol, carbine, and precision rifle through various entities. In 2017, AJ completed a full-time 3-year gunsmithing education in general to advanced gunsmithing, custom competition, carry, and guild quality firearms. He brings a vast knowledge of ballistics, instruction, competition, and real-world employment of firearms to the table, often being considered the pro's pro among the groups he has worked with. So let's welcome Mr. AJ Zito onto the show. Hey, AJ. You're muted. Let me unmute you. Okay.
Okay, let me try that again. Hello, Laura. How are you?
I'm great. I'm great. I hope I didn't bring all of it down with that tidbit, but then, man, that was important stuff I think people need to know.
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, I think it was a great way to start the show. Last time I
Yeah.
was here, I think I got a little heavy. And so this time you get to start by getting a little heavy. So it worked out perfectly. It was great. It was
Yeah, I
great.
mean, we're gonna have some balance. I'm sure there will be some lighthearted humor during the show. So, but that tidbit's been on my heart for a while, and I had to get it. Had to get it out there in the world. So I'm glad that's done. So,
Oh, it was great. Absolutely.
so tell me, I heard that last weekend you were at the Quest. So for people that don't know, could you tell us a little bit about what the Quest is and how you were involved in that?
Sure, sure. So yeah, I just got back from the Quest, and the Quest is kind of the brainchild of Brian and Shelley Hill at the Complete Combatant and Scott Jedlinski at Modern Samurai Project, and basically a conference based around um, red dots, right? Red dots in general, and the way we kind of break it down. Is everyone has their different day. Scott starts off the week with his brand of performance shooting, right? And then Brian comes in with his brand of defensive type shooting, I guess is the best way to describe it, all relating to the dot. And then I was there as the competition brand of shooting. And everything's based around the dot. um, it's a super cool experience. There's a ton of support for it,
Mhm.
and you get a little bit. You get to spend a full day with each of us essentially. So, um, you know, uh, Scott teaches the whole first day, and you get Scott's take on all the great things that separate Scott's program from everyone else's. The body mechanics, the understanding the red dots, and so on and so forth. And then you get to go into day two with Brian, and you get Brian. Brian is just the most wordsmithiest of friends that I have, and it's amazing to listen to him speak. And I've had amazing conversations with Brian, and then you get his uh, translation of red dot shooting
Mhm.
in kind of the context of the defensive world.
Mhm.
Um, and it's super cool. And then, on the third day, they have a floating instructor, right? So the first year it was Tim Herron. This year it was me. Next year it will be Riley Bowman. So it just kind of alternates. So it's super cool. It's a
Mm.
super awesome event. We have a ton of great times. It really is an experience, a red dot experience for everyone.
Yeah.
So a lot of fun, a lot of fun.
That's cool. And organized primarily by Shelley Hill, who is super
Hmm.
good at organizing.
Yeah, that's a fact. That is a fact. Yeah, and
Yeah.
we want for nothing when we're there. So it's
That's so
fantastic.
cool. That's so cool that you can have so much fun doing something you love and helping people so much. That's awesome.
Absolutely,
That's awesome.
absolutely.
I did hear a little birdie told me that your topic was, oh, shoot, something about comparing competitive and tactical shooting. Is that correct?
Sort of. Yeah,
Sort
yeah,
of?
kind of.
Okay.
Yeah,
What was
that's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it. It was kind of
okay.
trying to bridge the gap between competitive shooting and defensive shooting or tactical shooting, with the
Okay.
understanding that, you know, shooting is shooting. The only thing that changes is the context in which we're doing it. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to do all the same things in a competition that I would in a defensive context, and vice versa. But at the end of the
Yeah.
day, the mechanics of shooting a gun are the mechanics of shooting a gun.
Mhm.
And everywhere we go, the most accurate rounds, the fastest, typically wins, whether you're playing a game or you're playing for keeps. So, and that was kind of what it was based on. And then kind of understanding how to use competition as a tactically minded individual. A lot of us think we
Mhm.
have to go to a shooting match, right? And we have to play the game, right? We have to do whatever they say, and that's just simply not the case. We can use, sorry, I keep knocking my camera here.
You're getting excited over there, AJ.
yeah, my favorite topic. But we go and we think we have to play this game the way it's prescribed, and that's just not necessarily true. We have leeway in the games to do things that we want to do, to use them to our benefits. Nothing says in USPSA I can't draw my gun from concealment. There's nothing that says I can't do that.
Yeah.
Steel challenge is a little different. They do have some requirements on that, but there's nothing says you can't, utilize cover and concealment in USPSA. Nothing says you have to, bring 42 magazines on your belt and they have to, no one says you have to run a compensator and this and that. So there's a lot we just take for granted, and getting people to just kind of understand what a great tool competitive shooting can be for the tactically minded individual. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think I was the first person, at least in my little league or match or whatever you want to call it, our little group of people up here that shoot USPSA. I don't even know if it's really a USPSA sanctioned, but it's a defensive pistol competition. I know that for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I was the first person that ran my Enigma concealed. And I remember walking up to, the starting block or whatever. And I remember the lady looking over at me and she's like, "Where's your gun?"
Yep.
And then when I showed her where my gun was, then her eyes got big, because she was like, "Oh crap, she's carrying appendix. Like, oh no, this could be bad," And but then as soon as she saw me go through one of the stages, that there was no question about any of it after that, but I mean, I could see why she would like, it seems like with appendix carry, when you're at a competition and everybody's usually on their strong side hip carry outside the waistband, when you're not used to seeing inside the waistband appendix carry, especially from concealment, at first it can draw attention, not the kind you want. It can be, you really are like, they really are watching you really, really heavily. And then you really kind of have to prove that you're a safe shooter, that you holster safely, that all of those things. So I think that was such a good thing, though, because the first time I did that, it opened a lot of people's eyes that, yes, you can safely carry inside the waistband appendix from concealment, and you can shoot that way in competition, and you can be fast. You can be fast.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that was the thing that blew everybody's mind, because they're like, "Oh, well, geez, she's from concealment. Okay. Sweet little girl with her gun, And then they were like, "Oh, crap, she can really shoot." So that's when people start to really pay attention, I think. So it's good to break some of those molds sometimes, don't you think?
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
And nowadays it's become, the first match I ever shot appendix from concealment was USPSA, and it was like 2013. And that reaction of the ROs, I will never forget. It's much exactly like what you're saying.
Yeah.
They are dumbfounded. And if, at the time, there weren't a whole lot of people doing it. So everyone's confused, like, can you actually do this? I'm not sure this is in the rule set. And it very much is, right? Again, we forget so much about competitive shooting, and you show someone a video of guys carrying appendix outside the waistband at USPSA matches in the 80s and the 90s. And it's like, this isn't really that new. But it goes, it disappears and it comes back. And nowadays, because there are so many more people doing it, it's not such a shock value, and people really are coming around to, like, hey, I can do this, and it really doesn't cost me as much as everyone thinks it does. For most people, the draw is eaten up by movement for most stages, anyways. So you're not that far behind. And the reloads, typically, if they're planned right, and you're not a single stack shooter like me and have to do 42 of them a stage, you've got one or two reloads a stage, and they get eaten up pretty quick. So you're still fast. You're still fast.
Yeah, I had a student last weekend. He was an appendix carry. He was one of like 3, I think, of 12 that were appendix carry. And he came up to me at the beginning of the class and apologized because he was from concealment appendix carry. He said, sorry, I'll probably slow everybody down because it's going to take me so long to get my gun out. Not realizing that actually, I told him, and we talked about, the joining points and the efficiency of the draw stroke, that actually appendix carry can be quite a bit faster because what you just said, less movement, and it's right there on your center line most of the time, or close to your center line. So you actually have an advantage. And he had never considered that before. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah. That's so, and that always begs the question, how did he come across appendix carry in the first place?
Well, he just told me that he did it because, I don't know what brought him to it. I think it was comfortability for him. That's the reason he said that he carried that way. So I guess that's why he did it. Comfortability will lead people down all kinds of paths.
Yep,
we like to be comfortable,
absolutely.
Right, AJ? We talked about that a little bit, about we like to stay comfortable. So
absolutely.
Trying to decide where I want to go here, because I do want to get into a little bit more of performance shooting, what that means exactly, because the title of the show was exactly that, how to be more effective at performance shooting. But in order to do that, we first must define it. But I noticed that in your notes, one of the things I had down here was I had asked you earlier about one of the most valuable lessons that you had in your life experience. And one of them you said was your first training class. So I'm curious to find out, can you set the stage for us? I want to hear about AJ Zito's first training class. And what did you learn from that?
Gosh, I learned so much from that. So I took, I'm trying to think what year it was. It must have been 2000. I want to say 2003 was my first training class. And it was at a place called The Site, which has gained a resurgence in popularity over the last few years. It's a training facility in Illinois. And I ended up there because I went to college with a guy, and he had been there before. And he's like, "Oh, you got to go with me. You got to go with me," because I had an interest in shooting, and of course, at that point, I thought I was pretty darn good at shooting because I had never received any training and never done anything really with a gun. So clearly, I knew what I was doing. So he convinces me to go with him to this school at The Site. And then sure enough, the week that we're supposed to get there, he tells me he's not going to make it. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm just going to go to this training class by myself.
And what kind of a class was it, AJ?
It was a 5-day tactical pistol class.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. So go big or go home, I guess.
Yeah.
So, and of course I had a 1911 for it because, I had to. So I got there and very quickly was humbled at the amount of information. I just simply didn't know anything about anything. I
know the feeling.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. I certainly have a thing in my life when I let my ego take over. I'm quickly humbled. The universe takes care of that for me.
Yes, it does.
So I was very quickly humbled and acquired the new nickname of Dick Shooter in the class. That was my nickname because I had such a terrible pre-ignition push that I could aim at the head and still hit the groin. It was pretty bad.
You're kidding me. Wait. The totally. AJ Zito, that's a master class shooter now. Wow.
100%. Okay. 100%. It was embarrassing. And it was so bad. I could not figure it out. And I won't say who the instructor. I'm sure he may not even be alive anymore. But the instructor could not help me. And for whatever reason. And there's reasons that occurred there that it's like, oh yeah, no wonder you couldn't help me because you couldn't shoot either. But
Oh.
the the right about day 2 or 3, two of the guys in the class took pity on me. And so they had bunk houses there. And I was in a bunkhouse all by myself because I didn't know anyone. Everyone there showed up with their friends. And I'm just there like, okay, I'm going to go. They told me I'm in this bunkhouse. So I'm in this whole bunkhouse alone. And these guys, God bless them, they moved their stuff into my bunkhouse and they said, hey, we're going to help you, man. And I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. How are you going to help me? And they're like, you need to dry fire, dude. And I'm like, cool. What's dry fire? And so they explained to me, dry fire and essentially just taught me how to dry fire correctly. And I'll never forget, we sat in this bunkhouse and watched, because there was only like 2 channels out there because it's the middle of nowhere. And so we watched Sex in the City while I dry fired for like 2 hours and really figured out how to dry fire. Totally true story. True story. So I went from that, and just the 2 of them who I will forever be grateful for. I won't mention their names here, but I know they're still out there and still in the shooting world. But the next day I walked in and I shot an expert score, the youngest person ever at that time in the class to shoot an expert score. Yeah, overnight, because these 2 guys helped me understand dry fire, and the 2 of them changed my world right there. And they didn't have to. They didn't have to. They could have just been like, this kid, he's never going to know nothing about nothing. So, but they didn't. They helped me so much. And, I walked out of that school with a new appreciation of the fact that I did not know half of what I thought I knew. And of course, your first training class, you learn more than any other class you will ever probably take.
Yeah.
So it was an amazing experience that I will never forget, and I will never forget those 2 individuals that helped me out, because honestly, without them, I would not be here today at all.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
So then when did you decide to become a competitive shooter? Like, when did you get really serious and you're like, okay, I'm going all in on this? And what was your first match like? Like, what was that process like? Was that a whole other huge obstacle?
Yeah, because I let my ego get in charge yet again, and I thought I knew something about shooting, and and part of the problem was, so let me explain. What had happened was, I was like, I had done some shooting, right, and there were other guys in an organization that I was at that were pretty good shooters as well, and they were competition shooters. And I had grown up watching, competitive shooting on, Sundays, and it would pop up on ESPN when I was a kid, and it's like, oh, that's so cool. And it would happen like one time a year, and you'd never see it again. And and then other shows would just come on randomly, and you could never find the time. So I'd seen people shoot competitively on TV and stuff, but didn't really know anything about it, because where I was, honestly, just didn't have any competitive shooting going on. So 2012 or 13 ish,
so this is like 10 years later.
Yep.
Okay.
This is 10 years later. So throughout those 10 years, right, I had joined the military. I had gotten out of the military. I had gone into contracting. I had gone into executive protection. And yet again, my ego said, well, you're the best shooter so you must be pretty good, buddy. And I was wrong. So I found, and what had happened was I found a match, right? And it was an IDPA match. And don't get me wrong, I was a good shooter. I found an IDPA match, and it was a classifier match. It was the only match they had. It was just you shoot, back in the day when it was the old classifier that had 3 stages with like 1,700 strings of fire or something like that. There was kneeling involved and retreating and charging and all sorts of stuff. So I went to this match and I made master. And of course I was like, well, I must be pretty good at this shooting thing. I'm going to go try some of the other sports. And everyone's like, oh my God, you made master. And I'm like, okay, well, I guess I am pretty good at this. And then I shot my first USPSA match and was immediately humbled at the fact that I did not know half of what I thought I knew. Because that was the first time I had seen in person what amazing shooting looked like. And I'll never forget a friend of mine kind of took me. He's a grandmaster now, amazing shooter, a guy named Les Kismartoni. At the time, he was like a B-class shooter, and he kind of said, hey, new kid, why don't you come with me and I'll show you the ropes of this USPSA thing. And I'm in awe of these people. I'm like, I didn't even know you could do that stuff with a gun. Like they're like doing like a lot of stuff with guns really fast. And I can't do that. And, what do they do for a living? And it's like, oh, well, he's a dentist. And I'm like, oh, that dentist could kill me a lot. That's
that dentist
wow.
could kill me.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm like, wow, I do this for a living, and I am not as good as I thought I was. So that really jump started a lot. And that understanding that, we all say there's always somebody better than us out there. But the first time you show up in a room and you think you're the most dangerous person there, and then you realize that you are one of the least dangerous people there, it's quickly humbling. And it's like, I explain this in the class, and I explain this in a lot of my classes too, especially out at the Quest. When that moment happens, and that moment happens to almost all of us when we start shooting competitively, you have a choice. You have a choice to go with your ego and recognize, hey, these people are better than me. I don't like how this makes me feel. This is just a game. So whatever, guys, make it real on the streets. I don't need this, and I'm going to never show up again. So that's option number one, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, that's where we see a lot of military and law enforcement guys, why they never get into competitive shooting. And it hurts the ego, because it does, you show up and there are these guys that don't carry guns for a living, guys and gals that don't carry guns for a living, and they're doing things that we could only dream of, skill wise. So that's option one. And option two is recognizing that these people might know something more than I do, and put aside, this, and recognize that there is information to be gathered here. There is skill to be gathered here. And if you want that, if you want to be as good as them, you need to start humbling yourself and asking the questions and learning from them, because they know something you clearly don't, or I clearly didn't. And I recognized, hey, I want to do that. You need to tell me about that. How do I do those things? Because up till this time, and I had been through a ton of classes at that point, many classes, and I had never seen shooting like that before. And I was like, how do I learn that? Because so far I have trained with a lot of people and no one has taught me how to do that. So that really kickstarted it. And I started, I changed the people I went and trained with. I started looking more at guys that had competitive backgrounds and who actually competed, So that was
That's cool.
That was another experience.
It is nice to see someone of your caliber to have such humble beginnings, AJ.
Well, thank you. Thank you, I think.
Yeah, no, it really is because, most of us watching you are watching you because you're such a great shooter and such a great human and you love teaching people, right? But to realize we don't just wake up and start there. It's a process. It takes time. You have to put in the work and you have to learn. You have to put your ego aside, as you said. All those things are important. So I know competitive shooting is something that you're passionate about, but you also, based on your past experience, have some real world application that you can understand how to bridge that gap. So for those that are maybe more in the, I guess, I don't know how to describe it, the more tactical world,
Sure.
for lack of a better term, how can you help bridge that gap? What are the things that somebody thinking about getting into competitive shooting or maybe haven't even thought about it, what is there to learn from that can be applied to a real world self-defense situation?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So here's the thing that tends to happen. People, the community that gets wrapped up, and they're the ones that typically you'll hear, oh, that stuff's going to get you killed in the streets, right? Well, what
Mhm.
they typically focus on has nothing to do with what they're actually seeing. What they're talking about is things like tactics, right? Oh, you're just going to run into a room and start blazing and blah 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 blah. Um, if you are only focusing on that portion, that context, and not recognizing the skill that is going on in front of you, that's where the problem is created.
Mhm.
The things that competitive shooters do skill wise is, let's face it, they are the best shooters in the world when it comes to guns, when it comes to gun handling, when it comes to speed and accuracy on demand at speed. There
Under
is
stress.
absolutely. And if people
Yeah.
don't think, if you think you need people shooting at you in order to make something stressful, you have not shot a match competitively, because we routinely watch people's heartbeats go up into the 140s, 150s, 160s in
Mm.
matches, and it's not because they're sprinting back and forth,
Mhm.
purely from the anxiety and the stress of shooting a match. um, it's typically why everyone says, oh, I had a good stage plan until the beep went off, and then I
Yeah.
forgot everything. It's because you let your anxiety take over, and
Mhm.
that's what happens. But the recognition that competitive shooters, their ability to produce skill, high performance skill on demand, is greater than any other segment of the shooting community. It truly is, and that's something to aspire to. That's something to learn. That's what we want to do. The context can change no matter what, and we
Mhm.
see that all the time. And frankly, it's a silly argument at this point in the world. As far as I'm concerned, we know the information. This isn't the 80s where the tip of the spear special operations guys, you didn't know anything about them. We know that the highest levels of our offensive shooters or our special operations community have competitive shooters come to train them. They don't have you know uh, other communities come in. They bring in competitive shooters to teach them, because they recognize that, yes, while the context may be different, the skill set, the ability, is the same. Shooting is shooting,
Mhm.
no
Mhm.
matter what that context is. Now, is the context going to change some things? Sure, it might change the fact that now I don't get a walkthrough. Okay, well, in the military, we used to call walkthroughs rehearsals, and we dedicated 2/3 of our time to them. So that
Hmm.
argument that you don't get a walkthrough in real life is silly again.
That's not the word you
We
were going to use.
it's not, but I'm trying to be nice. It's a kindler,
Thank
gentler
you.
AJ.
Thank you, AJ. That's sweet of you.
Yay!
Yeah.
But it is, we, for the longest time, we've told individuals to play the what if game. right? Well, what's a what if game? What if game is nothing more than a walkthrough. It's a rehearsal. And we do it constantly. It's the same as visualization for competitive shooters. We preach visualization of stage plans and so on and so forth. So it really is something to be learned. And really the performance, human performance is something all of us can get better at. We don't need to be, the greatest athlete in the world to put these things into usage.
Adam came on so we could sing happy birthday to him, AJ.
Yay!
Heck no. Hey, so AJ, what you're saying, what you're saying is so important, right? I was the normal cop SWAT guy who just poo-pooed the idea of competition, and yet the guys on our SWAT team that were the best shooters, but also I'd tell you the best tacticians, were also the ones who were competitive shooters. And we always pulled that stupidity of, well, it'll get you killed on the streets, and it's not tactical what they're doing. Yet to me, it seemed like if you can't think through what shooting actually is, then you probably shouldn't be doing either in the first place. And it's just so interesting how you put that. It's so well put that if I could somehow convince people, and hopefully you're able to convince people here, that, the competitive shooting side is such a needed, necessary component. It'll grow you as a shooter. It'll grow you as a thinker. And the tactics is a completely separate genre. So therefore, I had great tactics, but I was actually, though I thought I was a good shooter, until I started competitive shooting, I didn't realize how poor of a shooter I was. And I'm talking coming as a cop, SWAT guy, military, you name it. The competitive side built the shooting side far more than I ever thought it could. The tactics is another thing completely. So really it's the joining of the two, and you've got to be smart enough to think through the two. And the way you articulated it was so brilliant. I just hope people listen to you on this.
Thank you. I hope they do too. But
another thing,
and that's the thing. Go ahead.
Sorry, AJ. Another thing that you said was that I think you said you can't lie to yourself in competitive shooting. So what did you mean by that?
Yeah. So with competitive shooting, there is no, there is where you lost.
Okay.
And you can't, you can try and
you can make
all
excuses.
the excuses you want.
Yeah.
You can try.
I've seen that.
You can. Oh,
yeah.
Sure. Oh, well, if I had a different gun, cool. Go get a different gun. Now let's see how it plays out. Oh, well, I lost again. Well, if I had, if I had $11 billion, well, in competitive shooting, there's divisions for everyone. You fit in there. There is a division. Every person, every gun out there fits in somewhere into USPSA. It just does. Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, let's compare you against like individuals with like equipment, with like everything. Listen, 125 power factor ammo, right? For guys that understand what that is, light loaded ammo compared to, regular factory ammo. I hate to break it to you, it really doesn't make a difference at all. At all. It's not going to be the difference between a winner or a loser. And in fact, if you look at, a lot of competitive shooting, our loads are much hotter than most people think they are. My competitive load is almost identical to most factory loads, so it doesn't matter. Those things don't matter. What does matter, and what you won't be able to lie to yourself about, is people that possess higher levels of skill. The better people win. And that's what it is. And that's without going into the crazy nuances of, well, did you win or did they lose? Because there's something to be said about that. But that's much more on the competitive minded side of when we get to a little higher understanding. But other than that, you can't lie to yourself. You can't make the excuses in competitive shooting. You either won or you lost.
Yeah.
So
I want to go back. Whenever you were talking about your experience from 03 to 13, there was a 10-year time span before you got involved in shooting, in competitive shooting. And then the trajectory after you started in competitive shooting. And I'm just curious, like from that guy that took that first training class to the guy who is at your level now, what are like, if you could narrow down a few things that were pivotal for you, that you started it like incorporating into your practice routine, or what are the biggest takeaways that people can get from you on their path towards that?
Sure, absolutely. So probably the biggest thing that I learned was that it was not about round count. Simply just throwing rounds down range did not make a difference. Now, at some
Thank you for
point,
saying that.
but it's totally true, and God knows I
Yes.
tried it. I tried to throw
Yes.
as many rounds as I could down range, and I got no better. I just didn't.
Mhm.
What I did was I got consistent at what I was doing, but I didn't get any better. I didn't get faster. I didn't get more accurate. I just got, I could do the same thing the same way every time, um,
Mhm.
slowly and accurately. So, uh, you know, um, so that was the first thing, understanding that the round count did not matter. The other thing I had to learn was truly how to practice. I
Mm.
just didn't know. I did not know how to practice. I thought I could go to the range. I could take 500 rounds to the range with me once a month or once a week, and be good. And I'd be like, oh, I'm going to shoot the fast drill, and then I'm going to do one reload one for 7,000 repetitions, and I'm gonna
Mhm.
that's going to make me an amazing shooter. And it didn't,
Mhm.
and then it was like, oh, well, if I just shoot these 400 different drills every time I go to the range, I will be better. And surprise, surprise, I wasn't better. So there was just a ton of stuff, that I really had to learn how to practice. I had to really understand how to balance live fire with dry fire. And I'm still trying to figure that out. That's one of those questions. I think when Tim was on here, I posed that question in the audience,
Mhm.
and he's the same as me. Like, I still don't know what the right ratio is. And I can't tell you what the right ratio is, because it's going to depend on you. It's going to depend on what you're trying to achieve, the skills you're trying to do. I don't know, but I know there's a balance. I know when
Mhm.
I have too much live fire and not enough dry fire, some of my key fundamentals start to fall apart. Likewise, if I have too much dry fire and not enough live fire, my recoil management falls apart, my tracking falls apart, a lot of things start to fall apart there as well. So there has to be a balance there, and that's something I'm always experimenting with, always experimenting with. So those are some of the key things. The other thing is simplicity in training. Um,
Mm.
and that was a hard lesson too. I wanted to be that guy that set up a stage every time I went to the range, and I was like, I'm going to run this like 600 times, and I'm going to be so amazing. And you do that. You go to the range with all these intentions, and you do it once, maybe
Yeah.
twice, maybe you spend the time to set it up, and then the next time you're like, well, I can set up half a stage, it'll be fine, I'll just work that. And then the next time you go, you're like, I'll set up one little entry point on the stage, until eventually you're like, I don't think I really need to go to the range today. That's a lot of work. I could just, I'll dry fire instead. That's what I'll do. And then the
Uh-huh.
next time you're like, well, I dry fired really hard yesterday, so I'm just going to do like 5 minutes today. And then eventually you just stop doing it. So I had to learn those things. I had to figure those things out, and I'm still, I still fall off that wagon all the time. And it's like, oh
But you get
man,
back on.
exactly. And that's the thing.
Yeah.
One of the things I really try and preach to people is it's not about the intensity of what you're doing. It's about the recency of what you're doing.
Yeah.
Um, you know, one dry fire session, you know, 3 days a week for 3 or 5 minutes is better than one dry fire session for an hour a week.
Yeah.
You're going to be better off less time more recently. So
Yeah.
stuff like that.
So we're almost to the hour mark, just so everyone's aware. So if you have questions for AJ, you need to be putting those in the comments, please, because we're going to be getting to those pretty soon. I'll see if we have any questions pop up. Are you good on time, AJ, or do you need to wrap up here within the next 5 minutes?
Nope, I am
Okay.
all good. I am all yours. Send what you got.
Okay, well, I had a follow-up question on that, and that is, you talked about instead of throwing rounds down range, basically what you're saying is quality versus quantity is what I'm hearing. So what can people do to up the and maybe I misunderstood, so correct me if I'm wrong, but what can people do to use their time wisely when they are practicing? What should they be focusing on, concentrating on? And I know that varies depending on the shooter, but in general, if you're just throwing rounds down range, you're almost mindlessly shooting. You're just going into that subconscious competence that you have. You're reinforcing that without trying to build anything new or better into what you're doing. So any thought process on that could help out people?
Yeah, absolutely. And don't get me wrong. Sometimes we have to shoot the guns, right? We have to put rounds down range, and sometimes a significant amount, in order to understand the guns. But there has to be a purpose behind it. So many of us don't actually have a purpose behind the exercises or drills we're doing when we go to the range. So we shoot a bill drill, right? So, and I say this all the time, like the bill drill is like my most favoriteest drill, like ever, right? I'm like, oh, bill drills, let's do this. All right. But so many of us, and I use it as an example, because so many of us do exactly the same thing every time we shoot a bill drill, right? We go to the range, put the target up, we load up like all the bullets and all the magazines. We're like, okay, I'm going to shoot this thing in 2 seconds or less, because that's what bill drills are. They have to be in 2 seconds or less. Whether that means anything to my ability as a shooter or not, that's what we try and do. And that's the wrong way to approach, the bill drill. That's not purposeful, right? That's using a performance metric as practice. That's not a thing. It's like dot torture, right? Dot torture drives me nuts because people use dot torture incorrectly all the time. Dot torture is not a practice session. It's not. It is a performance metric, right? And really, what it is it's an accuracy only performance metric. That's all it is. But we think it's a training session, right? And I get it. It's because it causes you to do a lot of stuff. But what we know about human performance is it doesn't let you do anything enough to have any significant repetition for it. The bill drill is the same way. We're shooting the guns, but if we don't shoot it purposefully, we're not really learning anything from it. We're just trying to hit an arbitrary number that some dude in the 80s said that we should be able to shoot this in order to be a master. Well, not all of us are masters. Some of us need to shoot that thing in 3 seconds. It doesn't matter, though. If we used it as an exercise to work on our grip. Hey, when I grip a little bit more on the support hand, I notice that my bill drill time goes down because the sights start tracking like this instead of like this, so we can utilize it more purposefully than just throwing rounds down range. And we do it all the time. A lot of us go to the range and we work on things like one reload one. Why? What are you getting out of that? Nothing. Honestly, in my opinion, you're not getting a whole lot out of that. You'd be better served incorporating reloads into your exercises or complex exercises. Run Blake drills or double accelerators or whatever, any of these amazing drills that are out there. Run those and work on those techniques. Sure, there's reloads in there too. Great. That's a better use to refine what you've been doing in dry fire, because that's where that work should have been happening. So there's a whole science to practicing, and I just so happen to teach a class with my buddy Tim Herron about that.
What's it called?
But it's called Train for Mastery.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 2-day class, and it's all about basically the skills of learning how to practice, or making effective practice. Purposeful practice is what we call it.
Okay.
So yeah.
Can people look that up on Tim's website or on yours, or
Yep.
both?
Yep, it's all on. So if you want to sign up for it, it's on Tim's website. I have
Tim
a blurb
Heron.
to it. Yep,
Okay.
timheronshooting.com. We do it like 5 times a year ish.
Okay.
But yeah, it's all, we don't teach you how to draw the gun. I don't teach you how to reload the gun. What I teach you how to do is take all the technique you have and how to break through your plateaus, rethink how you're approaching your practice without just going to the range and throwing 1,000 rounds down the range,
Yeah, because that gets
range
expensive.
every time. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And ain't no one got time for that, right? I'm shelling out that money. No. So Adam,
Hi, Adam.
you've been through the class, so
Yeah, so that's why I wanted to jump on, right? The Train for Mastery class you and Tim Heron do, right? I got to go through it with Brian Hill, the very first class you guys did together, and it was fantastic, right? For those of you thinking about it, right, it's very much a diagnostic class, which is what is my heartthrob there, right? You get to really break it down and think about it, and it's like AJ just said, you're not throwing rounds down range. Man, it was such a good, thoughtful process through it all that, boy, if you could talk more people into that, I think you'd have far better shooters out there than the ones that just go blow out rounds, 1,000 rounds in a weekend versus thoughtful rounds. It was fantastic. Would you be able to tell people more about that class? Because I think that is one of the most pivotal classes I've found in the U.S. that I think more of us should go to.
well, thank you. Yes, I agree. Sign up today. But yeah, I mean, this class was born out of an understanding, right, of the struggles that we all have, which are how come I am plateauing? How come no matter how many rounds I throw down range, I'm not getting better? Why? Oh, well, if I just go to the range more, if I just dry fire more, I surely will break through this plateau, but that doesn't happen.
No.
And then what ends up happening is we burn ourselves out, because burnout is real. And we just stop. We just stop doing it. And we all experience this at some point. If we train enough and we shoot enough. So what this class is supposed to do is really, I'm trying to get you, or Tim and I are trying to get you to rethink how you approach practice, right? We think what people are doing is, GMs are going to the range every day of the week, and they're shooting 1,000 rounds a day, and they're setting up stages, and they're doing all this stuff, but that's simply not the case, right? What you'll find is that things are much more simple, but they have to be purposeful. Everything we do has a very specific intention, a very specific purpose, so that we're not going to the range and spending 6 hours a day. Listen, I got like 6 jobs, all right? I can't be spending one of my days like completely at the range multiple days a week. I can't do it. So how do I best utilize my time? How do I best utilize my equipment? I don't need barriers and walls and all these things, 32 pieces of steel to get better. What I really need is probably 3 target stands at most, maybe a couple sticks, and some ammo, probably no more than 300 rounds of ammo, and I can get a solid session that will blow the socks off of any 900 round training session where I'm setting up stages and doing all sorts of stuff. So understanding how to make your practice truly purposeful for what you're trying to achieve, how to tailor drills. One of the things I do now, I don't know if I did this when Adam came through, was much like the bill drill. I take the bill drill and I break the bill drill down using the same drill, trying to achieve 4 different things. How do I use the bill drill as a vision exercise to push my vision? How do I use it as a grip diagnostic exercise? How do I use it as a movement exercise? All these how do I use it as an accuracy exercise? Because in the long run, the drills themselves don't matter. The purpose behind them and what I'm trying to achieve matters, right? And that's going to change how I approach it, and how I approach everything. So that's kind of the class in a nutshell, and how to utilize those things, and how to refine, how to test, if you are making progress, but also how to look at your own practice and make it maximize its effectiveness. So you're not wasting time. You're not sending a ton of rounds downrange that you don't need to. So.
Yeah, it became a lot more thoughtful, and it caused me to become a lot more thoughtful in the experience of shooting versus just shooting to shoot. And boy, that was pivotal. So I'll back out. I just want to be sure that we plug that, because I think that's so
Yeah.
needed by people.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, and Tim, when he was on the show, he talked about that as well, and he went into some depth about that. So you guys can check that out. I don't remember when he was on. I think it was probably 6 months ago or so. But if you just search up Tim Herron on Defenders Live YouTube or Rumble, you should be able to find that. We do have a question here, which is interesting. We're talking about practice, so it happens to go right along with that. Lisa wants to know, what do your practice sessions look like, and do you use video for self-evaluation?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, totally. I am all about videoing your practice, both live fire and dry fire. Um, I've been very blessed in the past to have had great training partners. I've also been very cursed in my past to have had really not great training partners as well. Training partners can make or break you, but at where my life is right now, I don't really have the luxury of a training partner anymore. So video becomes my training partner. I become my own training partner, and it's going to show me, things that I'm not perceiving. We all think we do something some way until we see it, and then it's like, oh, I guess I don't do it that way. I'll never forget one of the huge turning points in my life was shooting a class with a guy named Frank Proctor, who I'm sure many people are familiar with. This is many years ago, but I'm not even sure he was quite nearly as famous as he is today. But I was like, oh, I saw a video clip of him shooting. I was like, I don't know how that guy's controlling recoil like that, but I got to go figure that out. So I drove from Chicago to Arizona to shoot with him. There was like 5 people in the class. It was amazing. But one of the things that I had no idea, we were talking about reloads and dirt behind the magazine. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, when you clear your garment, you grab behind the magazine, pull it forward, and then you get your mag. That's costing you time. I was like, I don't know that I'm doing that. And he's like, yep, here's the video right here. And I was like, oh man, you are right. So sure enough, I went home, and he had this really cool, I don't think it exists anymore, a thing called Coach's Eye, which was an app and stuff. And I used to utilize Coach's Eye religiously in practice and training, because it let me really focus in on things. But video became such a huge deal for me, and I can set it anywhere, and I can see things even a training partner couldn't see, because I can put the camera downrange. And don't shoot your camera, be careful.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
so I could use it a lot. As far as what do my training sessions look like, it really depends. It depends on what I'm working on. Typically, they follow a similar structure every time I go. There's some type of like an accuracy warm up. I guess that's the best way I can call it. Typically, some type of group shooting is what I will start off with, and that's more of an equipment check than anything else. Make sure my dot's shooting the way I want it to. Make sure I'm kind of shooting the way I want it to. Things of that nature. Then I will typically warm up with something like 1-inch squares at 10 yards, and I'll try and shoot 5-round groups on that. Trying not to drop anything out of the 1-inch square or 1-inch circle. And then I'll get into whatever I'm working on for that day. If it's a movement day, I'm going to focus on just the movement aspect of things. So maybe I don't shoot the gun a whole lot. Some movement days I don't shoot more than 50 rounds. And I just work on, position entry into this position, or exiting and going into this position. Some days it's just getting the gun out of the holster, within the first step I take, forward or back or to the side or something. And I just try and work that skill set. If it's like a speed day, then those days, all those rounds I didn't shoot on movement day, I'll probably shoot on the speed day, because I'm really getting after the gun those days. That's when I'll start shooting things like bill drills, or some Blake drills, or El Prez or something like that. I'll start incorporating some of those things. So it really just depends, but it'll follow that similar structure. Typically, some days are, like I said, 50 rounds. Some days are 350 rounds. It really just all depends. But they'll typically follow something like that.
That reminds me of, like, people that work out, they have like a leg day and an arm day, right? Like upper body and lower body. It's kind of the
That's
same
exactly
sort of
how we
thing.
explain it. Yep.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. That makes sense. Well, cool. Let me see. I don't think I see any other questions right now. We're over the hour, so I probably shouldn't. I don't want to be greedy with the time you've given us. But if you're not going to sing happy birthday to Adam, then I guess I will just have to cut you loose.
Where's Adam? Get him back here. I'll sing happy birthday.
No.
He looks great for
No.
72, doesn't he?
He
That's
does. I
amazing.
know. I know. Yeah, he really does. So, well, you've been just a pleasure to have on, AJ. I think that
Well,
we've
thank
covered a
you.
lot of things that can really be helpful to people. At least get them started and down the right direction, and give them some resources. We've got your social media is scrolling on the bottom. And if you want to check out AJ's website, it's practicalperformance.org. So, and I'm sure there's a contact page on there too, if you wanted to get in touch with him, or if you have any questions, you can reach him there. Any parting thoughts before we leave, AJ?
Go shoot some competition, whether you want to or not. All right. You'll be better for it. Don't give up on it. Learn how to practice. And I promise life will be good. We don't know how far human performance goes. So there's only one direction for all of us, and that's up. So get after it.
I love it. What a great way to end the show. Well, thank you for your time tonight, AJ. I'm going to wrap up here and move on to some other things here real quick.
Well, thank you for having me, Laura. It's truly been a pleasure again. Thank you. I always enjoy coming out here.
Yes, it's been fun. All right, guys. So I did have like a video queued up. I was going to tell you all about the new video that I'm posting on the Locals channel in the Defenders Live community. Instead of queuing that up, I am going to put that on the Defenders Live Facebook group. So I'll be dropping that teaser video in the morning, as well as on locals.com. For you guys that are already paid members of locals.com on the Defenders Live community, you can look forward to a new episode of Defenders Uncensored, where we're going to be talking about what makes a strong man. And it's a very interesting roundtable discussion that we had with Adam Winch, JT Grover of RevTech, and Jeff Anderson of Warrior Life. So you guys I tried to upload it tonight, and I was having all kinds of issues. So I wanted to announce that it was already up there, but nope, the internet was not having that. So I'm going to try and re-upload that again tomorrow. That'll be on the Locals channel. For those of you that don't know what Defenders Uncensored is, it's kind of hard to describe, but it's sort of it's a bunch of behind the scenes conversations that I have with different people about various topics. Some of them are controversial. Some of them are not. None of them we really feel should be. But a lot of the content there that you'll find on locals.com is not anything we could ever probably post on YouTube or Facebook. And so Locals is kind of our place. That's why we call it Defenders Uncensored there. But still, if you want to check that out, you can go to locals.com, go to the Discover tab, and search Defenders Live. And that's where you'll find the Defenders Live community if you want to check that out. I'll be dropping that What Makes a Strong Man video tomorrow, that roundtable discussion will be there. And next week is a surprise. So I'm not going to be queuing up and telling you what to expect for next week. So you'll just have to wait and find out. So tune in next week, 7 p.m. Mountain Time. I can't wait to see all you beautiful people again. Until then, take care.